Nah, ini adiknya diajak main tadi.
Kita tadi ngomong juga.
Bakune Kerry. Berarti mau aneh, susah enggak? Berarti ngomong sih. Emak kan yang ngomong sih bakune suwi Kerry ya. Setahun 3 wulan kok di beda-beda kayak sapu.
Baik, selamat siang. Para panitia, boleh saya dibantu? Apakah bisa mendengar suara saya? Kalau bisa, boleh. Oke, thank you, Miss Lauren. Ya, bagi para peserta, mungkin silahkan cek settingannya apabila suara saya belum terdengar. Bisa juga mungkin bisa dibantu nanti oleh Miss Siska via WhatsApp grupnya ya. Oke, sebentar lagi kita akan segera mulai. Oke, peserta pada mulai berdatangan. Kita akan tetap memulai tepat pada jam 1 siang. Oke, pembicara kami sudah ready di sini. Ibu Loren, hai apa kabar? Oke, ada.
Nice to see you.
Hi, Miss Lauren. Nice to see you too. And also Mr. Jason. Hi, Mr. Jason. Okay, so we are about to start. All right. Okay, because it's already 1 o'clock. Okay. Kita mulai saja. Nanti untuk bagi para peserta yang menyusul bisa langsung masuk. Oke. Ini belum ada di waiting room lagi. Oke, akan saya mulai sekarang. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. Selamat datang kepada para peserta webinar. Perkenalkan nama saya Giovanni Widianti Asriningtyas, atau bisa lebih dikenal dengan nama Asri. Saya bertugas sebagai pemandu acara, MC dari webinar Meaningful Teaching Online, yang diselenggarakan oleh Semarang Multinational School. Nah, sebelum kita memulai webinar pada hari ini, mari kita awali dengan doa dan lagu kebangsaan Indonesia Raya. Mari kita berdoa menurut agama dan kepercayaan masing-masing. Berdoa dipersilakan. Selesai. Lagu kebangsaan Indonesia Raya. Maaf sebelumnya. Terima kasih. Tentunya Bapak dan Ibu sekalian sudah tidak sabar untuk memulai sesi penyampaian materi webinar Meaningful Teaching Online pada hari ini. Namun sebelum itu, Ibu Dr. Anda Dwi Jana Beltia Karen MPD atau lebih akrab dengan Miss Betty akan menyebut Anda terlebih dahulu selaku Kepala Sekolah Semarang Multinational School. Ibu Betty, silahkan memberikan satu.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. Yang terhormat Bapak Kepala Dinas Kota Semarang, Bapak Gunawan Sabtogiri, SHMM. Mudah-mudahan beliau sudah hadir. Tadi konfirmasi terakhir beliau akan hadir pada siang hari ini. Serta Bapak, Ibu, guru SD, SMP yang boleh hadir mengikuti webinar dengan tema Meaningful Teaching Online. Puji syukur patut kita panjatkan kehadirat Tuhan Yang Maha Esa, karena oleh perkenannya maka webinar ini boleh terselenggara. Terima kasih yang tak terhingga kami sampaikan kepada Bapak Kepala Dinas Pendidikan Kota Semarang atas perkenannya memberikan dukungan, petunjuk, dan berbagai arahan. Bahkan berkenan untuk hadir membuka webinar ini di tengah kesibukan beliau yang begitu padat. Terima kasih juga yang tak terhingga kami sampaikan kepada Bapak Ibu Kepala Sekolah, guru-guru SD maupun SMP yang juga boleh ikut bergabung dalam webinar ini. Tengah begitu banyaknya pelatihan dan webinar. Pelaksanaan webinar ini adalah satu perwujudan dari komitmen sekolah Semarang Multinational School untuk berkolaborasi, membangun dan memupuk kebersamaan, belajar dan berbagi ilmu dengan sekolah-sekolah sahabat ada di Dinas Pendidikan Kota Semarang, Provinsi Jawa Tengah, bahkan secara nasional. Pembelajaran online memberikan banyak kesempatan dan pilihan bagi para pendidik maupun peserta didik mendapatkan pembelajaran, persiapan dan penyampaian kurikulum, serta berbagai sumber daya yang tersedia. Namun banyak guru mengeluh tentang kurangnya perhatian serta antusiasme peserta didik dalam proses pembelajaran online. Banyak yang berpendapat bahwa pembelajaran online tidaklah sebaik pembelajaran tatap muka dalam membantu peserta didik mencapai prestasi maksimal. Persoalan utama mungkin bukan pada kurikulum, materi yang diberikan, tetapi mungkin dalam keselarasan antara harapan pembelajaran online dengan instruksi guru dan partisipasi siswa dan diferensiasi. Nah, melalui webinar dengan tema Meaningful Teaching Online ini, Miss Lauren dan Mr. Jason, pembicara kita yang luar biasa, pada hari ini akan membahas kiat-kiat pembelajaran dan mempertimbangkan perbedaan individu dan mengidentifikasi kebutuhan, minat, dan kemampuan peserta didik. Semangat Bapak Ibu ya, semangat semuanya. Mari silahkan menyimak. Ya, semoga kita semua boleh mendapatkan ilmu dan manfaat dari webinar pada siang hari ini. Silahkan Miss Asri.
Terima kasih Miss Betty. Pak Gunawan Sabtogiri sepertinya belum hadir. Nanti mungkin kita bisa memberikan waktu kepada beliau pada sesi selanjutnya, Miss Betty.
Saya akan konfirmasi kembali ya, Miss Asri.
Oke, kita lanjutkan dulu ya. Oke, terima kasih Ibu Betty, Miss Betty atas sambutannya yang luar biasa. Oke, sekali lagi selamat datang kepada para peserta webinar Meaningful Teaching Online, How to Cater for Different Learning Needs During Online Learning. Ya, kebutuhan peserta didik berbeda-beda. Dibawakan oleh Ibu Lauren Carter yang cantik, bisa dilihat fotonya di bawah situ, atau mungkin bisa lihat sendiri langsung, dicek, dicari di Zoom ya, dan juga Bapak Jason Rainer. Oke. Mereka berdua adalah guru-guru berpengalaman dari Semarang Multinational School. Webinar ini ingin mengajak rekan-rekan guru untuk kembali menilik pengajaran kita di kelas, terlebih selama pembelajaran daring berlangsung. Topik yang diangkat oleh kedua pembicara merupakan topik yang saling melengkapi satu sama lain. Jangan khawatir, tiap slide dari pembicara terdapat 2 buah versi, yaitu versi bahasa Inggris dan versi bahasa Indonesia. Juga para moderator, yaitu saya sendiri dan nanti Ibu Yaya, akan memberikan rangkuman topik dalam bahasa Indonesia untuk membantu peserta yang lebih memilih menyimak topik dalam bahasa Indonesia. Sebelum webinar ini dimulai, kami akan menonaktifkan, sudah dinonaktifkan Ji, atau mute microphone dari tiap peserta agar acara dapat berlangsung dengan lancar. Peserta juga tidak perlu menunggu hingga sesi tanya jawab untuk memberikan pertanyaan. Silahkan menuliskan pertanyaan di slido.com atau slido.com dengan memasukkan kode yang atau mungkin bisa mengikuti cara-caranya yang sudah di-share oleh Miss Siska di grup WhatsApp, tapi nggak usah khawatir. Setelah ini, saya juga akan menunjukkan caranya di slide. Link presensi akan dibuka setelah sesi tanya jawab dengan memasukkan 2 kata kunci yang akan disebutkan setelah ringkasan pembicara pertama dan ringkasan pembicara kedua. So, Bapak Ibu, stay tune. Nah, sebelum kita memulai webinar ini, yuk kita simak video singkat mengenai Semarang Multinational School tingkat early years agar Bapak dan Ibu sekalian dapat mengenal kami lebih baik.
Hi, I am Kanchan. This is my classroom.
Hi, I'm Daisy. In this class, we also have this big mirror.
So I'm going to take you to one center at a time. When you are here, you're not going to be confined only to the classroom. Now, let's have a look at our outdoor area. So that was the tour of my classroom.
Oke, penasaran? Silakan kunjungi YouTube kami atau Instagram Semarang MS. Okay, for this event, there will be 2 moderators, myself and Miss Yaya. Untuk acara ini akan ada 2 moderator, yaitu saya sendiri dan Ibu Yaya. As moderators, we will inform you of the background of our speakers. Sebagai moderator, kami akan memberikan sedikit informasi latar belakang para pembicara hari ini. We will start today's webinar with Miss Lauren Carter, dan continue with Mr. Jason Rayner. Kita akan memulai webinar dengan Ibu Lauren Carter, dilanjut oleh Bapak Jason Rayner. Nah, oke, untuk Bapak Ibu yang mungkin belum sempat melihat atau join di slido.com untuk sesi tanya jawab, jadi Bapak Ibu tidak usah menunggu hingga sesi tanya jawab, langsung klik slido.com atau, oke, ini adalah cara pertama. Halo, selamat siang. Saya menunjukkan kepada Anda bagaimana caranya menggunakan slido.com untuk menuliskan pertanyaan-pertanyaan Anda. Pertama-tama, Anda akan diberikan tampilan seperti ini. Join at slido.com dan kemudian akan diberikan kode. Buka tab baru, kemudian klik slido.com. Kemudian, masukkan kode yang telah ditunjukkan kepada Anda tadi. Saya akan memasukkan kode 798123 sebagai kode dummy. Tinggal diklik tanda panah, maka Anda akan masuk ke halaman sebagai berikut. Nah, yang Anda perlu lakukan adalah klik type your question di sini, kemudian jangan lupa masukkan nama Anda, yaitu nama, dari misal sekolah atau instansi, ya, boleh menggunakan slash, boleh menggunakan koma, dan kotanya. Nah, kemudian tinggal masukkan pertanyaan Anda. Contohnya, apakah itu Slido? Tinggal klik send. Gampang kan? Anda bisa memasukkan pertanyaan lebih dari 1 kali. Selamat mencoba. Oke, nah ini adalah kode Slido untuk menuliskan pertanyaan Bapak dan Ibu guru. Ya, oke. Bapak dan Ibu juga bisa langsung mengklik link yang sudah saya bagikan di chat, atau mungkin yang punya bisa membaca barcode, bisa untuk barcode-nya untuk di-klik untuk di-scan juga. Kodenya adalah kalau ingin menggunakan cara yang saya tunjukkan tadi 378569. Sekali lagi 378569. Bapak dan Ibu guru dapat menuliskan pertanyaan selama webinar ini berlangsung. Oke. Nah, ini dia. Tidak lain adalah dari Ibu Lauren Carter. Beliau adalah lulusan Universitas Flinders, Australia Selatan dengan gelar diploma bahasa di Bahasa Indonesia Lanjutan dan sarjana pendidikan di bidang pendidikan dasar atau sekolah dasar. Beliau memiliki pengalaman mengajar lebih dari 12 tahun di berbagai sekolah internasional di Indonesia yang memungkinkan beliau untuk memberikan pengajaran yang berkualitas baik, baik itu tatap muka maupun daring. Beliau memiliki filosofi pengajar yang luar biasa. Guru harus mampu menjadi teladan bagi muridnya dan mampu membimbing siswa atau siswinya agar mereka dapat menjadi anggota komunitas yang ramah, peduli terhadap sesama, dan berpendidikan. Baik, sebelum kita mulai, sepertinya sudah masuk ini dari, saya stop dulu ya. Oke, sepertinya ini sudah ada dari Pak Gunawan. Masuk mungkin memberikan sambutan. Tulisannya di halo.
Halo, Mbak.
Selamat siang Bapak. Monggo Bapak. Ya,
Ya,
silakan.
Ya, selamat siang Pak Gunawan. Selamat
Selamat
datang.
siang.
Terima kasih Pak
untuk
kehadirannya, mau menyempatkan waktu di tengah-tengah kesibukan yang luar biasa.
Ya.
Ya, kami persilahkan Pak untuk memberikan arahan atau kata sambutan.
Ya, terima kasih. Selamat siang. Salam sejahtera, salam sehat, salam bahagia untuk kita semua. Yang saya hormati Bu Betty dan para narasumber, kemudian host, dan juga para peserta webinar yang amat sangat saya cintai dan saya banggakan. Ini terima kasih nih ada acara yang digagas melalui webinar ini dengan meaningful teaching online. Perlu saya sampaikan bahwa di era informasi teknologi ini kita dituntut semua pelaku pendidikan untuk selalu meningkatkan kompetensi dan profesionalisme. Nah, ini terus terang saja harus bersama-sama. Semua pihak harus terlibat di situ, mulai dari sekolah, guru, orang tua, dan juga masyarakat. Nah, makanya saya terima kasih ada acara seperti ini. Mudah-mudahan ini membawa inspirasi bagi semua guru dan juga sekolah-sekolah untuk selalu meningkatkan potensi daripada peserta didik dan juga para guru-gurunya. Harapan kami dengan kegiatan ini dapat meningkatkan mutu pendidikan yang ada di Indonesia, di Jawa Tengah, khususnya di Kota Semarang. Mungkin itu saja yang bisa kami sampaikan, dan sebelumnya mohon maaf ini kami dalam perjalanan baru nyetir, juga pakaiannya ada kami kelupaan ini, Bapak pakai kaos ini. Terima kasih dan atas izin panjenengan semua kegiatan ini bisa dimulai. Terima kasih matur suwun, selamat siang. Bu Betty.
Ya, terima kasih banyak Pak. Sehat-sehat dan bahagia selalu, sukses buat Bapak dan keluarga. Terima kasih Pak.
Terima kasih, sama hati-hati J Pak. Oke, terima kasih telah menyempatkan diri. Oke, baik, tanpa menunggu waktu lagi, without further ado, Miss Lauren. Let me open up first. Okay, the time is yours.
Okay, good afternoon. Welcome everyone to today's webinar. It's nice to see some familiar faces out there. I can see some staff who used to be at SMS. I can see some people we've seen before at other events. So welcome and thank you for joining us today. Okay, the most important thing, I'm going to talk about a few things today. The most important thing for a teacher is to make sure that they are always continuing to learn. Today, I would like to share my experiences with you. I'm a grade 4 teacher here in Semarang, and I'm actually also a student. I'm an online student myself through university in Australia. So I know what it feels like. And my third perspective is that I'm a parent. I have 2 young children who are doing online learning and have done for the past 12 months. The challenges I face for each of these 3 perspectives is quite different. But by seeing all of these perspectives, I'm able to improve my teaching to better suit the needs of my students. the last 12 months. Who would have thought we would still be online? It's been 12 months and here we are, we're still online. And I think we should have a round of applause for all of the teachers who've been teaching online for the past 12 months. So well done to all of you, and well done for being here today. Online learning has not been an activity. It's not an experience. It's not something we did one time. It has been our reality for the past 12 months. I have seen the list of participants of those that are here today, and I note that in fact, some of you are beginning teachers. I see some of you are in your first year, your second year of teaching, and I will say, don't give up. This is a harder year than most, so hang in there, and surely next year will be a little bit easier. Did you know that one of the most important roles in a child's life is that of a teacher? In the past 12 months, we've had to redesign our teaching style and our classroom to meet the needs of the students. Let me ask you a question. If you were a student in your classroom, how would you reflect on your teaching? What would your students say about you? What would they find different? What would be difficult for them? And what about the parents? What would they say? So put yourself in the shoes of the student. What kind of help do you need from the teacher, and are you getting it? I'm going to ask you to reflect on your own teaching, and I'm going to ask you at the end of the presentation about what kind of teacher are you going to be. Remember, teaching online needs to be meaningful, purposeful, and we aren't at the end just yet. I think we'll still have some form of online learning even when we go back to school. So now is an opportunity for all of us to improve our teaching practice and make sure that we are keeping up with 21st century learning. Okay, these are the things I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about building relationships, social and emotional development, steps to success, clear objectives, multiple exposures, differentiation, feedback, resources, and then reflection. We actually only have a few hours for this webinar, so it will be a brief introduction. I will start with a more general overview of these ideas, and then after me, Mr. Jason's going to go into more detail. The most important thing is that you're listening and you're reflecting on what kind of teacher you're going to be. Okay, building relationships. Here we go. Building relationships is important. Having a good relationship with your students and families will make this experience much more successful. Now, more than ever, we need to find a way for teachers, students, and families to work together. In the past, we met our students on the first day. We saw them, we met their families, we saw their mum and dad. What about now? Have you ever seen your students? So let me ask you, with a raise of your hands or the reaction button on Zoom, have you seen your students this year? So you can raise your hands or you can press the reaction button for if you have seen your students this year. Miss Astrid?
Some of my students come to school. Yeah, we met for about 4 days in a week, some of them.
Yeah. So some of us, has anyone, so let me change my question. Has anyone not seen their students? Put up your hand if you've not seen your students. Yep, I can see that some of us are responding. Thank you, thank you. Okay, let's go back. Imagine what that feels like for the students. They've never seen their teacher. That must be difficult for them in the beginning. So, how are you supporting each and every child? My advice is to try and keep as much of your day as normal as possible. What I like to do is I like to start the day all together and finish the day all together. We also follow a schedule so that students feel that it is a normal school day. What do we normally do that can be done online? Circle time. Circle time is a great way for students to check in with their teachers and friends. Circle time is a time for sharing, asking questions, and building the relationships. It gives students the opportunity to ask anything. Another example is through a drop-in Zoom session. All you need to do is open your Zoom and leave a link for the students to drop by if they need anything. This works best at the end of the day and with a scheduled time. I have an example from our school. Our high school maths teacher, every Tuesday at 2:45, she turns on her Zoom and the students can drop by if they want, if they don't want, and then she's there to support their learning. If you don't have Zoom, and some of you may not, if you don't have Zoom, you could chat via WhatsApp, have groups on WhatsApp, email, SMS, or even little handwritten notes. Another thing about Zoom, coming back because we use Zoom, at the end of your Zoom session, wait. Don't end the meeting. Allow other students to leave the session if they don't have any questions, but then you should hang around and wait and see if anybody would like to ask anything. Always stay online for a few minutes to wait and see if a child is waiting to talk to you. Some students feel more comfortable in smaller groups. This actually works the same for the students. After teaching, they can do some parts with their friends over the phone or via Zoom. In thinking about their relationship with their parents, are your students able to be independent, or is there pressure on the teacher, on the parents to be teaching the child? We need to make sure as teachers that we aren't putting too much pressure on parents to replace the teaching part while online. And patience is key. Technology can be tricky, so teachers and students, you need to be patient and you need to keep trying. Social and emotional development. Schools do not only teach content. There are so many more things that are learned from school. Morals, value, respect, so much of that is taught from school. And it's not learned just from the teachers, it's learned from their peers. So how are you supporting that peer learning in your own classroom? Group work and collaborative learning is so important for students. Students can also be much more comfortable to ask questions and they add their thoughts in smaller groups. In my teaching this year, we use groups as it's more effective for us. We separate the groups and then we teach them on a rolling schedule each day. Shorter sessions in smaller groups is more effective in my classroom. Generally, I'm teaching around 6 to 10 students in one group at a time. And then we move the groups. So I teach 6 students and then another 6 and then another 6 and then another 6 until I've seen everyone. For circle time, like I mentioned before though, that is a whole class session, not in small groups. We have groups that are delegated based on ability, groups based on friendships, groups that are random, groups that they choose themselves. This way, the students get to see different peers each day and are exposed to different styles of learning. For every new student, or even a student who is struggling, assign them a buddy. A buddy is someone who will check in with them and help them. A buddy can be a more confident student or a student that has been with your school for longer. Only children with parents that both work also could benefit from having a buddy. The buddy system encourages open and effective dialogue among peers and tends to break down social barriers with their classmates. It helps to create a collaborative learning environment in which peers feel less hesitant to raise questions. Having a buddy system or a mentoring style system in the classroom allows students to practice their leadership skills and support the students who need more help. This is a great tool that with the correct modeling and guidance from the teachers, it can be very effective. These things can easily be implemented during online learning to ensure your all learning needs. Steps to success. So, students come to school to learn. Are your students learning or are they doing? That's different. Learning is one thing, doing is another thing. Think about that for a moment. In my teaching, these are the steps to success when starting a new topic. You can use this for math, science, English, Bahasa, all of your subjects. They are introduce, that's your explicit teaching, the teaching part. Explore, how do you do it? How do you work through it? Discover, through collaboration and activities. Understand, and that's your assessment, review, and feedback area. In the first part, for explicit teaching, differentiation is important. Not all students come to a new topic at the same point. Some students are here, some students are here, some are way up here, and some are way down here. It's the starting point that's important for differentiation. If you don't start from the right place, you're not building on prior knowledge, and it could be too difficult or too easy for others. If we were at school, would you give a test before teaching? No, we would never do that. But online, we give materials that we haven't taught yet, and we can't do that. So how do you do it on Zoom? How do I do it online? For the first two steps, we use smaller groups. On Zoom, we use breakout rooms and a rotating schedule. If you do not have Zoom, I would recommend that you make a recording of yourself teaching. Teach, make a video, be in front of the classroom, record it, and share that video with your students. You can share it via a link on YouTube. You can share it via WhatsApp. You can share it via Zoom. You can share it any way you want. The recorded videos are excellent because they allow the students to replay the video as many times as they need to understand. They also are able to pause and take notes where needed. Following these steps, introduce, explore, discover, and understand will increase the success in your teaching and learning. So introduce it, learn it, explore it, discover it, do it yourself, and then assess it, then check their understanding. So make sure you're doing these 4 steps before you assess it. Clear objectives. Lesson goals always explain what students need to understand and what they must be able to do. This helps the teacher to plan activities and helps the student to understand what is required. When your student looks at your task, they pick up your task, they look at it. Are the learning objectives clear? Is it clear what you want them to do? What is the objective? I'm going to use an example of fractions. So I'm teaching fractions in grade 4. Am I adding fractions? Am I simplifying them? Am I representing it as a diagram? What am I doing? So you must be clear in what you're doing, so your students are clear in what they're doing. So what is the teacher asking me to do? How do I do it? How do I complete it? Where or how do I write the answer? If you send a task, okay, do question 1 until 10. Where, miss? How, miss? On what? Is it clear? Also, we use a WALT. What are we learning today? Why is the WALT important? From your learning objective, what are you teaching? And then you put that into child-friendly language, so not the big curriculum words. And then they know what they're doing. The WALT allows students to focus on the specific learning objective, and this will help them later in the assessment stage as they know exactly what the teacher is asking them to do. What do your students do if they don't understand? If you give them a task and they don't know how to do it, how do they tell you? Do they call you? Do they message you? Do they email you? What's your process? So you need to think about that. If I was a child at home and I didn't understand this, how do I tell Miss? How do I call Miss Lauren and tell her? For us, we have Zoom. The students can call, the students can message. Your students may be WhatsApp, maybe email, maybe Google Classroom, something. But how do they contact you when they don't understand? If we were at school, Miss, help me, Miss. How do they do that from their home? So what's the WOLT of this presentation? What are we doing today? What are we learning today? We are learning, the WOLT of this presentation is learning to be a meaningful teacher for all students in multiple different contexts. Multiple exposures. Multiple exposures provide students with multiple opportunities to encounter, engage with, and elaborate on new knowledge and skills. Students cannot be expected to do something only once and then be able to master it. Think about reading and writing. We don't teach that one time. We don't say, okay, reading is done, writing is done. We don't learn it in one time. It takes multiple times and reviewing it to get that learning to stick. Coming back to my fractions example. They must explore, discover, play with manipulatives, draw it, make it, do it another way, and then you can assess it. So activities should be different also. We can't give the same activity 3 times and then assess it. If a student doesn't understand the first activity and we don't vary it, how will they understand the next activity? So students need multiple, so many, spaced interactions, it's not all one day, with new knowledge and concepts. If we just do it, done, next, do it, done, next, the learning will not stick. That learning will not stick with them, even more so online. So they need to, if you want them to make deeper connections and understanding to the new knowledge, this is how it needs to be done. So when you teach something new, can your students remember it the following week, the following month? Is the learning sticking with them? It's important to review concepts throughout the year, also to make sure that they are retaining the new knowledge. This will be particularly important when we're planning our classes in the new academic year, to look at the gaps and the knowledge that was missed in previous years. So this is even more important as you prepare for July and June coming up, to look at these different exposures to different things and make sure that they understand them. Whew. Next, differentiation. Okay, here are some things to think about for differentiation. And later, Mr. Jason's going to go into a lot more detail. So I'm just going to give you the introduction and my perspective and my experiences on this. Okay. Are your tasks achievable? Are they too easy or too hard? Are you building on prior knowledge? Are you using a one-size-fits-all approach? And then we're going to talk about remedial tasks and extension. So, are you just asking everyone to do the same, even with 30 children in your classroom? What about the students that are gifted? How can we as teachers make sure those students are not getting bored and losing interest in school? How can we keep these students interested during online learning? In my experience, the best way is through open-ended challenging projects and extension tasks. Take the learning and apply it in another context. Research more about a particular part of the task, or go back to the buddy mentoring system and implement that as well. As teachers, I'm sure you have all seen the recent statistics on the number of students who have left and will not return to formal school during this pandemic. So now is our time to make sure that we are catering to the needs of all students, to make sure that none of our students are getting bored and leaving. We need to make sure they're staying in school and that they are learning. We need to keep as many as possible. So another thing to think about, how long does each task take to complete? You could ask the students, you could ask the parents, you could survey them to find out this information, and then you need to alter your planning. In my classroom, after teaching online for a semester, I found that some of my students were doing their tasks until the evening, until night. They're still working on them. And then I found another group were finished by lunchtime and not doing anything in the afternoon. So I needed to alter the style of my tasks. I needed to alter the duration of my tasks. I needed to support one group and extend the other group to make the balance. So differentiation is not just giving them something else to do. You're finished, do this. You're not done, do this. You have to look at all of the aspects to make sure you really are supporting every student. Feedback. What is feedback? Feedback redirects or refocuses teacher and student actions so that the student can align effort and activity with a clear outcome that leads to achieving a learning goal. Without feedback, what's the point? How can I know where I'm going and what I need to work on? And how can I stay motivated? I've heard feedback from students throughout the year, from talking to students and as a parent and as a student. Why do the task if Miss isn't even going to mark it? Why should I do it if she doesn't check it? Or I tried so hard and Miss didn't say anything. Another one, lucky my teacher didn't check it because I know I got a lot of it wrong, right? It's really important that we review their work and we give them feedback. If we don't give feedback, we're saying that all those things are okay. It's okay to rush. It's okay to have your mum do it. It's okay to not get it right. So there are different kinds of feedback and they're all equally important. We have teacher feedback, peer feedback, self-feedback, and parent feedback. Now, the most common thing we hear from teachers, but I don't have time. I don't have time to give them feedback. So my answer to that is make time. You have to make time for it. And look at the other kinds of feedback. Peer and self-feedback can be just as valuable if modeled correctly. These feedback styles take time to set up, but it will be really worth it. In our classroom, we took the first term to model peer and self-feedback through verbally doing it ourselves and also through written rubrics the students could follow. If students are able to reflect on their own learning, they're able to see where they want to go and what they need to do to get there. Having the motivation coming from an internal source, coming from inside the student, is much more powerful than us just telling them what they need to do. How can students be expected to get it right if they don't know where they're going? In continuing on feedback, the next part for feedback is about specific teacher feedback. So there are different kinds of feedback from the teacher. Formal feedback. Formal feedback is assessment, reports, tests, exams, those things that we all do. It's part of our job. We have to do it. Informal feedback is every day. It's during the task. It's while they're doing it. And the reason informal feedback is almost more important is because you're able to redirect them before they're finished. While they're still on their learning journey, you can redirect them, their friends can redirect them, or they can redirect themselves before they get to the assessment stage. So we also have written feedback and verbal feedback. Now, written feedback, how are you going to do it online? What we do is we're fortunate that we have a platform called Seesaw. So I'm able to communicate with the students via that, and Zoom. So on Zoom, I can write to them, I can give them feedback. Verbally, the same. I can tell them during the class, during small group sessions, when we're talking, we can give each other feedback. If you're not on Zoom, if you're not video calling your students, what you could do is you could have a little note. When they pick up the tasks, leave a note for them, write something, say something, tell them what to work on. You could do it anywhere. It can be written, said, but it has to be done. We have to give them feedback during this learning online journey. It should be personalized, it should be relevant, and it's not praise. Feedback is not praise. Now, praise is like this. Well done, good job, nicely done, you did it. And that's nice to hear. Praise is nice to hear, but it's not helpful. And it's an opinion. It's what I think about it. So coming back to the issue of time for teachers, you have to give quality feedback more than quantity. Think about the quality of your feedback. In our experience, what has worked well in the primary school is what went well, even better if. So students are able to say what went well. In my task, what went well, I worked really well with my peers. I remembered all of my capital letters. I finished within the time frame. I wrote more than I normally write. That's what went well. Even better if. That's what I'm going to improve on next time. Even better if I finished it quicker. Even better if I remembered my punctuation. Even better if I was able to do it by myself. So I put this back to you in your class. You said, what went well? Even better if. It's an effective tool for self-feedback and peer feedback. Yeah, sorry, miss. Okay, here. This is just my opinion. This is my opinion on platforms that are available online. Now, during this pandemic, many websites and sources have actually given free subscriptions or really genuinely reduced the price. So you need to look around online also. If I have a look at these things here, these are the ones that I'm using. These are the ones that have been effective in my teaching and my learning. Canva, get on it. It's excellent. Canva for teachers and for students. Learn how to use it, teach your students how to use it, utilize it. It's important. Quizzes. Quizzes is like Kahoot. It's like Kahoot in that you make a quiz, you give the kids a link, they join, they can play together, they can play individually. One of the best things about it is it tells the kids instantly how they did. They get a score and they can try again. And then you get a report that is completely marked. So it's helpful for the teacher, it's helpful for the student. Get Epic. Epic is a great online English library. That's an excellent one. Wordwall is similar to quizzes in that you send a link and they are able to join and do activities. Math Learning Center, and this one's new. You can download entire math books for all of primary. The math books are there, interactive applications are there, geo boards are there, extension activities, it's all there. Take the time to go through the website and find what you need. In a similar way, Enrich Math has the extension math for your gifted students. Khan Academy has everything. It even teaches the students things. You can watch a video on something, you can do assignments, do tasks. You could spend all week on Khan Academy and still have something to do. Arts and Culture by Google, that was good even before the pandemic. So that one's a great one there. Miss Asri later in the group will share these slides with you. So you don't need to write them down now. You can look at them after. Okay, so in the beginning, I asked you to reflect on what it would be like to be a student in your class. Now I want you to reflect on what kind of teacher are you going to be? This pandemic has given us an opportunity to redesign the way we teach, focus on the important, and build up our relationships with individuals. It's the 21st century. We have to be more tech savvy. We have to find a way to integrate technology into our teaching. Even after the pandemic, technology will still play a huge role in learning. So how can you further your learning online? Learn via YouTube. There are tutorials for everything. You can find a tutorial on how to do anything. You should ask your colleagues and share ideas, share websites, share applications, and make sure you're working together as a team with your teachers at your school. One thing I learned when I first started teaching, when I first finished university, I was told, don't reinvent the wheel. That means that if someone you know at your school or another teacher knows how to do it, talk to them, learn from them, share. Now is the time to really have collaborative learning with other teachers. So on that note, I would like you to think about, what kind of teacher are you going to be? How are you going to be a meaningful teacher at this time? And that's it. Thank you from me. I'm going to hand you back over to Miss Asri. That was a lot of talking from me, and now Miss Asri is going to summarize that for you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Miss Lauren. Thank you so much. Okay, let's begin. Okay, ingin sekali saya memberikan rangkuman yang mungkin lebih sesuai dengan apa yang disampaikan oleh Miss Lauren ya. Tetapi masalahnya karena waktu kita juga terbatas, sebisa mungkin saya akan memberikan summary, but don't forget nanti slide ini pun akan kita berikan dan kita ada sesi tanya jawab. Okay. Alright, so thank you, Ms. Lauren, for the meaningful topic you have shared today with us. Saya akan memberikan rangkuman atas topik yang dibawakan oleh beliau. Ibu Lauren menggarisbawahi pentingnya memahami kebutuhan peserta didik dalam suatu pembelajaran. Karena berbeda-beda, baik itu tatap muka, terlebih lagi secara daring, di mana kita tidak bertemu langsung dengan peserta didik kita. Sebagai tenaga pendidik, sebagai guru, dituntut untuk berpikir secara kritis dan kreatif, mendesain ulang kelas, tidak bisa sama seperti sebelumnya, sehingga kebutuhan pembelajaran peserta didik tersebut dapat terpenuhi. Kita dapat mengawalinya dengan membangun hubungan dengan peserta didik, rekan guru, orang tua, dengan percakapan kecil, yang apabila tidak menggunakan Zoom, bisa dengan menggunakan WhatsApp. Memahami kemampuan peserta didik merupakan langkah yang sangat penting sebelum kita memutuskan langkah pembelajaran selanjutnya. Apakah peserta didik dapat belajar dengan mandiri? Memahami besarnya tekanan yang kita berikan kepada orang tua juga perlu. Apakah kita memberikan tekanan yang berlebihan kepada orang tua di rumah yang mengawasi peserta didik kita? Kuncinya adalah kesabaran dalam membina suatu hubungan. Selanjutnya adalah pembentukan suatu kelompok yang dapat dilakukan atau ditentukan oleh banyak hal. Berdasarkan kemampuan, pertemanan, atau persahabatan secara acak, atau mungkin ditentukan oleh peserta didik itu sendiri. Kita juga dapat menerapkan sistem buddy. Buddy means friend, temannya kita yang mungkin sudah lama untuk membantu peserta didik baru, murid baru yang mengalami kesulitan belajar atau mungkin kedua orang tua di rumah bekerja, jadi tidak bisa langsung mengawasi. Kemudian bagaimana cara kita memperkenalkan topik baru? Ibu Lauren memberikan langkah-langkah sederhana yang dapat kita ikuti agar proses pengenalan topik baru dapat berjalan dengan baik dan tidak hanya melakukan, tapi juga mereka sebenarnya benar-benar mempelajari topik yang diberikan. Jadi nggak cuma this, next, ya. Kemudian tujuan pembelajaran yang jelas juga harus kita berikan, okay. Supaya memberikan perencanaan kegiatan belajar mengajar yang baik dan membantu peserta didik untuk memahami betul apa yang harus mereka lakukan agar tujuan pembelajaran yang diberikan tercapai. Kemudian akhirnya pertanyaan, apa yang sudah kita pelajari hari ini? Untuk tahu tidak mereka dengan pelajaran yang diberikan. Hal-hal penting lain yang perlu dilakukan oleh tenaga pendidik adalah pemaparan berkelanjutan atau multiple exposure, di mana pemberian jeda atau space antara satu latihan dengan yang lain atas keterampilan atau pengetahuan yang baru saja mereka pelajari dengan jenis tugas yang berbeda atau bervariasi, tidak hanya sekali. Manfaatkan juga pembelajaran terdiferensiasi yang akan dikupas lebih jauh oleh Bapak Jason Rainer dalam sesinya, serta penerapan feedback atau umpan balik yang efektif dan tidak sekedar well done. Dan penggunaan aplikasi pembelajaran yang paling sesuai dengan kebutuhan kelas. Sekali lagi, tidak harus berbayar. Banyak sekali aplikasi pembelajaran yang tidak berbayar ataupun berbayar. Banyak sekali aplikasi yang memberikan potongan khusus untuk tenaga pendidik. Oke, saya tahu bahwa mungkin rangkumannya sebenarnya jauh dari cukup, tetapi kita ada sesi tanya jawab nanti, dan ini akan saya ingatkan kepada para peserta webinar meskipun tanya jawab masih dilaksanakan nanti setelah pembicara kedua itu Pak Jason, Bapak Ibu dapat mengajukan pertanyaan langsung melalui slido.com atau slido.com dengan kode 378569 atau langsung di link yang sudah saya berikan tadi sebelumnya ya. Oke, mungkin bisa saya forward lagi di sini di chat supaya oke. Oh, saya copy lagi. Jangan lupa menuliskan format nama, instansi, dan kota. Itu dia, ya. Oke. Sekali lagi untuk link presensi, mungkin udah ada yang menanyakan di mana saya bisa absen. Nanti Bapak Ibu setelah sesi tanya jawab kan akan ada 2 kata kunci yang harus dimasukkan. Oke. Nah, ini yang saya sebutkan tadi, kata kunci yang harus dimasukkan ketika Bapak Ibu mengisi link presensi. First keyword harus dalam bahasa Inggris nih ya. Different needs ya, lowercase dan juga dengan spasi. Sekali lagi kata kunci yang pertama adalah different needs. Oke, kebutuhan dari peserta didik yang berbeda-beda, different needs. Oke. Miss Yaya, apakah ada di sana, Miss Yaya? Miss Yaya?
Oke. Miss Asri, selamat siang.
Hai, selamat siang. Oke, untuk selanjutnya Miss Yaya, saya berikan waktunya sebagai moderator untuk Pak Jason Leonard. Silakan.
Iya, terima kasih Miss Asri. Selamat siang Bapak Ibu peserta webinar. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. Bapak Ibu guru sekalian, perkenalkan nama saya Yaya, Bapak Ibu guru. Hari ini saya akan bertugas sebagai moderator untuk Bapak Jason Rainer, pengisi pembicara kedua pada sesi hari ini. Jadi Bapak Ibu guru peserta sekalian, sebelum saya memulai sesi kedua ini, izinkan saya terlebih dahulu memberikan sedikit informasi tentang siapa Bapak Jason Rainer ini. So before we start the session, I would like to share some information about our second speaker. So, Bapak Ibu guru sekalian, Bapak Jason Rainer ini adalah salah satu guru yang sangat berpengalaman dari sekolah kami, Semarang Multinational School. Beliau memiliki pengalaman mengajar lebih dari 14 tahun. Beliau berasal dari Selandia Baru. Beliau memiliki gelar pendidikan diploma pasca sarjana dalam bidang pendidikan sekolah dasar dan juga sarjana psikologi dari kampung halaman beliau di Selandia Baru. Beliau ini memulai karirnya sebagai guru untuk kelas 7 dan 8 sekolah menengah pertama, Toko Mairiro di Selandia Baru juga, Bapak Ibu. Dan untuk saat ini, Bapak Jason Rainer ini bertugas sebagai guru sekaligus wali kelas 5 dan 6 di Semarang Multinational School. Beliau ini, Bapak Ibu guru, adalah sosok yang sangat digemari oleh peserta didik kami. Banyak fansnya Bapak Ibu guru ini. Kenapa Bapak Ibu guru? Karena beliau ini memiliki pengetahuan yang sangat luas, terlebih lagi di bidang sains atau ilmu pengetahuan alam. Beliau ini juga seorang pecinta seni. Beliau mahir bermain musik, mahir melukis, mahir fotografi, juga performing art seperti drama. Dan tidak kalah penting Bapak Ibu guru sekalian, beliau ini gemar menulis, juga traveling. Jadi dengan banyak kelebihan, dengan banyak ketertarikan di berbagai bidang, tentunya beliau ini hal-hal tersebut memungkinkan beliau memberikan pembelajaran yang menarik dan kaya untuk peserta didik kami. Jadi, Bapak, Ibu guru sekalian, peserta webinar, tanpa ditunda-tunda, kami persilahkan Bapak Jason Rainer untuk memulai sesi kedua hari ini. So, now without any further ado, Mr. Jason, are you there, Mr. Jason?
Yep, I'm here.
Right, now the time is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Ms. Yaya. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. It's great to see a few familiar faces here today, and also great to see a lot of new faces. So thank you for attending, and I really hope that you get something out of my presentation. I'd just like to start off by saying sorry if you can hear any construction noises. Of course, just as I'm about to start speaking, there is noises all around me. So I'll talk loud and hopefully I'm not too much interrupted. So the title of my presentation, I decided to call it Into the Wild because it feels like that's what we're going through at the moment. For the first time in history of teaching, we are navigating through what seems to be a jungle of learning and teaching online. So as Ms. Yaya said, I'm a teacher of 14 years. I'm from New Zealand. I've been in Semarang for nearly 4 years now, and I teach a composite grade 5 and 6 class. I have also been an online teacher for a little over 1 year now. So it's a bit of a learning curve for everyone, but we've done a lot of experimenting, a lot of different techniques, but what I'm going to talk to you today about is something that we do even when we're in the classroom, but a lot of people are wondering how you turn it into the online environment. So that's what I'm here today to talk to you about, which is differentiated learning. So today I'm going to be talking about what is differentiated learning, how we use assessment to guide differentiated instruction in our classroom, in our online classroom, how we use this assessment to group students, some information about learning styles and using differentiation with those, and how does it look like, what does it look like in the online classroom, in particular my classroom. So as Ms. Lauren said earlier, talking about the WALT, so a WALT is, I'm not sure if it's New Zealand Australian, but it's definitely something we use back in New Zealand, which is basically a learning outcome. So we are learning today. So the goal of my lesson today is, webinar speech presentation, is for you to become a more successful online teacher by applying differentiated instruction to your lessons. And there are 4 keys to success for this to work. And the first one is using assessment to guide teaching. The second one is grouping students thoughtfully using your assessment data. The third one is using different styles and learning tasks in your classroom rather than just doing the same old every lesson. And finally, variation of the tasks and what they entail. Next slide. So first of all, we need to define differentiated learning so that we know what we're talking about. So basically, in its simplest form, differentiated learning is meeting individual needs through tailoring your lesson to them. So in other words, changing your approach to teaching and what you teach and how you teach depending on the students that are in front of you. Because again, as Ms. Lauren said, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Okay, you have to acknowledge and appreciate that every student learns at different rates, at different paces. They learn in slightly different ways. So a good teacher is able to, through assessment, which we'll talk about soon, is able to find out information about what your student can and is yet not able to do, and then change your lesson in order to meet their needs. So what does it look like in the classroom? Well, as I briefly said, it's about changing the content, processes, products, or the learning environment. So in other words, if you've got a more able group, then you're going to be able to push them further and try and teach them deeper understanding of, for example, a task. So if I look at, I'm an English teacher in one of my subjects I teach, so we might be looking at reading. For a higher end group or a further advanced group, you are going to be using more complicated texts. You're going to be looking at deeper language features. So for example, you might look at the theme of the text, the author's message, inference, reading between the lines in order to really get a deeper, thorough grasp of the text. In contrast to this, with your lesser able students, you may not be able to use the same text. You might have to find a similar topic, but the text is written in a simpler way, and you may end up having to not go into such deep areas of the text, especially at the start. And that will allow you to give your students a better shot of understanding it. And it's a little bit, again, what Ms. Lauren was touching on was the gifted students, because if you're not challenging those gifted students, they will get bored and they will lose interest. How do we use differentiated learning in the classroom? Well, you need to really use ongoing assessment, and we're going to talk about assessment in a lot more depth in a moment. And one of the biggest things that you have to be able to do as a teacher is be flexible. It is a hugely important role you're playing for these students. And if you are going to push them and get them to where you want them to be, then you need to show flexibility in not only your teaching, but also in your grouping, which again, we'll talk a bit more detail about that shortly. Next slide. All right, so assessment is really the teacher's biggest tool to understanding your students. You need to know their abilities, and the only way you're ever going to know their abilities is through assessment. So there are two major forms of assessment: formative assessment and summative assessment. I believe formative assessment is the most important tool for differentiated learning, which I'll also talk a little bit about further at the end of assessment. What is formative assessment? Well, it is basically just ongoing assessment through the unit. It can be informal or formal. So you could sit down with the student and talk to them and discuss it and record what they've been saying, make notes, or it can just be informal. So it can be you talking to the student, or it can be students talking to each other and you listening to their conversations, and you're taking notes as a teacher as to what they can and can't do, where they are misunderstanding things, where they're going further than what you might have expected, and they're seeing deeper connections that you didn't think that they knew. So this is really your ability, your time to make really good judgments about their understanding and where you can take them to. If you've got a student who's seeing deeper patterns and making connections between different subjects, then you can really, if you've got a group of them, you can push them and group them together and focus on that, for example. Whereas other students who may not see those connections, you wouldn't go into that just yet. You would get them, try and get them there, but you would tailor your lessons that might be a bit lower rather than the higher achieving students. It can also be diagnostic assessment, for example, pre-tests for a unit, especially in maths. We often use pre-tests in order to see what understanding the students already have, and that gives you a good information about, you know, basically you don't want to be going over stuff that students already know. So if you've got a group of students that already can do, let's say, fractions, they can already simplify fractions. You're not going to go over and over and over that because they know it and they're going to get bored by it. So you need to know that information so that you can, obviously you talk about it and make sure they remember it, but you're not going to spend a huge amount of time on it compared to the students that have no idea how to simplify the fractions. Questioning and conversations, as I said earlier, are really key to formative assessment. It can be whole class questioning and conversations as a whole class, or it could be individually. It could be in groups. And we'll talk about that with how we do that online soon. And really the main thing about this all is it's tracking student attainment throughout the unit. It is not at the end of the unit. That is summative assessment, which we're going to talk about next. Next slide, please. So summative assessment, in contrast to formative assessment, is assessing the students at the end of a unit of work. So it is usually a test. Often it's a test, and it could be an exam, but most often it's the end of the test, the end of the unit, we give a test, what do they get out of whatever, and we give them a mark. And it's comparing it to standard or a benchmark, the curriculum levels, it could be you know, where the students at, where they should be at the end of grade 6 or at the end of grade 5, for example. Now, summative assessment is good to know how you have been as a teacher, but it is not necessarily good to know how to push your students forward, because Some units cover completely different concepts. So if you're using summative assessment to group your students for the next unit, it can be a waste of time because you're doing something totally different. For example, in maths, you could be doing a geometry unit, and then you're going into a number unit, and your geometry summative test is not really going to give you any indication of what they are like at number or statistics. Same as in English, you might be doing a unit on persuasive writing, and then the next unit is about descriptive writing. They are completely different. And we know as teachers that students have abilities in some areas and gaps in other areas. So formative assessment is the best way forward in order to guide your teaching and differentiating your learning to be successful. Next slide, please. Which leads on to grouping. So you should be using your formative assessment to modify your teaching and learning activities. So, as I said, conversations, pre-tests, you group your students based on ability. The level of instruction is varied according to what group you are teaching. And you may have to do lots of scaffolding for the lower level group as opposed to the higher level group. And if you're not sure what scaffolding is, it's basically just teacher support. So you're going to need to scaffold any new learning, but your higher achieving students are going to pick up things quicker. You can take scaffolding away. So basically, if I look at a writing task, if you're doing, say, persuasive writing, and you've found out that you've got a group here that have got a pretty good grasp of how to write to persuade or argue, and you've got a group of students that are sort of some basic ideas but haven't really got it all sort of held together and understand where they're going. The ones that don't have as much understanding, you'll provide lots of teacher support to get them further up. Now, you're going to eventually take that scaffolding away and give them less close instruction. But at the start, you're going to have to do things like modeling it by showing them a piece of text, looking at the patterns, looking at the language features, looking at the structure. And then you may do some shared writing as a class. And then you may need to give them more feedback than your higher end group. Your higher end group, they might see the patterns very quickly, and you can just let them do the task and then you can give them feedback at the end. But for your lower level groups, you're going to have to provide more immediate feedback, and you're going to have to really look at where their gaps are and where their misconceptions are. So there is can we go back? There's a huge amount of evidence that this not only improves student achievement, but also engagement. When they're grouped with people that are similar in ability, they feel more confident to answer questions, they feel more confident to make mistakes, because if you think about your own life maybe as a student, I know especially for me, when I was working with students that I thought were way above me, I felt scared to put forward my opinion because I thought they'd laugh at me if I was wrong. Whereas if I was put with people roughly at my own level, then we wouldn't have that same fear because we are all seeing things in a similar way. So that is a hugely powerful tool for a teacher. If your students are scared to answer and scared to make mistakes, you as a teacher, for one, aren't going to ever push them further forward because you can't improve them. The only way we can go further is by seeing the mistakes and fixing those mistakes. And as we know, that's it should be acceptable to make mistakes, and you should be modeling to your class as well that mistakes are fine and mistakes are a good way to learn. They're really the only way to learn. So don't be scared of letting your students make mistakes because it's a powerful way for you as a teacher to see these mistakes and see where they went wrong, and you can improve them. And sometimes you have to model making mistakes to the students by being humble yourself. We're not perfect. Teachers, I often make mistakes. When we're doing maths and I'm giving the answers, sometimes I'll make mistakes and the student will say, oh, Mr. Jason, I got this as my answer. And if you model it's acceptable to make mistakes, it really empowers those students and they see it that it's a fine thing to do and they're not scared of it. So, next slide, please. One other thing I want to talk about is learning styles and how learning styles need to be thought about too with regard to differentiation and really just regard to all teaching. So there's the VARC model of learning styles, which you've probably all heard of this before. There are visual learners, auditory learners, reading and writing learners, and kinesthetic learners. Generally, we're a combination of these. We're not often just one, but we often have a particular preference or strength. So for example, myself, when I was at school, I was definitely a visual and a kinesthetic learner. I didn't really respond to just listening to a teacher. I didn't really respond to just reading text. I had to be hands-on. I liked pictures and I liked diagrams. Whereas my sister was the complete opposite to me. She was more of a reading and writing and a auditory learner. So a visual learner is someone who learns best by visual graphics. For example, diagrams, it could be charts. Basically, it's just pictures and can be videos and photographs, but not necessarily. Auditory learners are ones who learn best by, they can hear people talking and they can just remember it from listening to it. And reading and writing learners are ones who like to read texts, slideshows or PowerPoints, for example, work for them. And they're also the ones that often do really well in written assignments. And finally, kinesthetic learners are the ones who like to be hands-on and interacting with it. The kinesthetic learners can be the hardest ones to teach because it can be hard to find enough activities that cater for that style of learning. But I believe with online learning, we have a lot of powerful tools that actually engage the kinesthetic learners. So Ms. Lauren talked a little bit about Quizlet, Kahoot, Nearpod, Seesaw. These online platforms, they actually provide interactive lessons and activities that can cater for these learners. And finally, I'd like to leave you with regard to the learning styles and tasks is the 20-minute rule, which I was taught when I was going through Teachers College and in my first years as a teacher, which is the 20-minute rule. And that is that you should try and not spend more than 20 minutes on one single task. Now, sometimes it depends, but generally I try and vary up my lessons, 2 or 3 tasks per lesson. So for example, I might start with a text, or actually I'd probably start with something like a brainstorming or some sort of introduction to the task. That would be 5 minutes of maybe them talking in conversation. Then we'll go into the text. We might read for 15 to 20 minutes and then they'll do some questions. We'll have some discussion. They could go into groups and talk about some different aspects of the text. Then we come back, we share it as a class. So what we're doing is we're varying up the lesson because evidence shows that after 20 minutes on a single task, output from these students starts to decrease. So you want to change it up and then it clicks their brain into something new and they become more engaged again. This could also be using the VARC model. So you might start with something that's visual and you just show a picture and they go into groups and talk about it, and then you might do some text, so it's a reading and writing task, and then you might give them an interactive task to finish the lesson with. So that is a great way to really cover all of the different styles, and it is also a great way to keep them engaged through the lesson, because if you're just talking for 1 hour at those students, they will disengage. So it's a good rule to live by. Next slide, please. So how do we put this into the online classroom? When we first started online, which was mid-March last year, for 1 week, we had 1 week before the school holidays started, SMS, we were using, well, I was using email and the students were reading the lesson, and then they would have textbooks, they would answer the questions, they would do them in Google Docs, they would share them with me. I would spend hours and hours and hours going through these Google Docs, marking, give it back to them. They probably didn't even look back at any of it, and it was boring, it was horrible for everyone. Then Miss Betty, our principal, told us about Zoom, and I had no idea what Zoom was. I'd heard of Zoom, but I didn't really know how it worked. And we went through a stage of going on Zoom. It was a bit like Skype, and it was fun. And then it was just like teaching in the class a little bit, but it didn't really allow for any grouping. I couldn't group the students and let them talk amongst themselves without everyone hearing everything that was going on, and hence no one would be able to hear anything because of all of the noise. And then we discovered breakout rooms. I'm not sure whether they were there from the start or whether they put them in, but I was introduced to breakout rooms, and we're going to talk about breakout rooms in a moment, but they're basically a way that you can group your students, put them in their own room and virtual room, and they can talk, and you can go into that room and you can come out and go into another group room, and you can give them a task and they can work on it without interruption from another group. Then you come back together and you share it and do whatever you want with the after the grouping. It also allows you to share screens, which I'll show you soon, and it's a great way that you can scaffold these students by grouping them. I have rotations with the teacher. Sometimes they're in a group on their own, and that's it. They don't have me in there. I just give them a task. Here's 5 minutes, go into the rooms, go into the groups, talk about something related to the task, and then come back and one of you share it. They can also, sometimes though, I go into the rooms and talk with them about it, and they can actually request your help if they don't know what they're doing. And then this can also be when they're working without me, it can be individual or group. Next slide, please. So I'm not sure how many of you use Zoom. If you've never seen it, this is what it looks like once you log in to it and your students join. This is a screenshot of an exit point, which is something that we do at SMS, which is where the parents come, and usually we do it in the classroom when we're physically in school, but we do it on Zoom now as well, where the parents join and the students share their learning with the class. That's why I have some adult students in there, if you're wondering. So this is what it looks like. We have all the students in there with their webcams on, and you can see them. And down the bottom are some different buttons, which I'm going to go into now. So next slide, please. So this is a zoom up, pun unintended, of the breakout room button, which is the 4 little squares. And when you click on that, you get this little window that allows you to assign manually, automatically, or let participants choose the room. Now, if you're differentiating, you're going to assign them manually. So you put the students into the groups that you want, and then you create the groups. The students will then click on their room, and they will be taken to a virtual space where they are away from the other students. Next slide, please. Another fantastic tool for Zoom is sharing a screen. So I use the whiteboard often, so you can make notes. You can, especially for maths, it's handy to show solutions and look at different ways of solving a problem. And you can share this, you can save it as a PDF and, a JPEG, and you can share it with the class. There's also web pages, so you can share the web page. I often will get them engaged, showing them a YouTube clip. So I will click on internet and Safari, and then it'll come up with YouTube, and I'll play the clip and they can watch it all together, or even an article. I also use Google Docs a lot, and the thing I love about Google Docs is you can make it a shared document and the students can contribute to it as well. And I'm going to show you, this is an example here of a shared writing task that I was doing, just showing you how I use differentiation in the classroom. So this is my group down the right. There are 5 students and myself, and this is inside the group. So we're using a Google Doc. This was a persuasive writing task. and we were doing a shared piece of writing. So we had a prompt which was to do with should PE be compulsory in school, and we were looking at the different techniques and different things that we could do to improve our persuasive writing. So this was slightly different depending on which group I was working with. This was a higher end group, so I was pushing them to go further with their writing. It allows me to do lots of questioning with just this group. It allows me to do some formative assessment by listening to their responses. I can hear what they can do and what they can't do, or what they've sort of got an idea about but they need more help with. They need more scaffolding. It also is great for student input because they can, this document is shared with them, so they can input their ideas onto this document as well. And as I said, it's also showing the scaffolding there by giving them some guided instruction, some close feedback with the group. Next slide. So finally, if you've never experienced a breakout room, you are going to be put into one for, I'm not sure how long we're putting you in, maybe 2 or 3 minutes. So basically you're going to be assigned a room. As you could see, there's a button that will tell you, ask you to join the room. You click on that, and then you'll receive a message from, I think, Miss Lauren, who's going to send you a message, what she wants you to talk about and think about. And then once the breakout room ends, you'll have 1 minute to come back to the room. Now, be careful you don't click leave the meeting, because you'll have to re-sign into the meeting. So there's 2 buttons. When you click leave, make sure you click the blue one that says, I think it's leave breakout room. So
Oke, Mr. Jason, jadi para peserta webinar kita mau coba breakout room nih. Mungkin untuk beberapa peserta yang sudah pernah coba, gampang. Tapi bagi yang belum, yuk kita coba sama-sama. Peserta kita total 57 peserta. Oke, jadi kita akan membagi mungkin 10 ya, Miss Lauren ya? 10 saja. Oke, 10. Nanti silahkan, ada yang masuk lagi. Oke, nanti silahkan masuk ke ruangan mana sih mau dimasukin. Oke, nanti perhatikan langsung pesan dari saya di bagian atas ya. Oke, saya akan buka. Oke, saya akan open all rooms right now. Oke. Hati-hati, jangan leave nanti ya. Leave breakout room nanti belakangan. Oke, silahkan Bapak Ibu, silahkan masuk. Oke, silahkan masuk. Oke, ini sudah ada yang masuk ini. Oke. Ya, Miss Lauren mungkin bisa menuliskan pertanyaan langsung ke saya, atau saya forward ke teman-teman sekalian. Oke. Nanti jangan leave Zoom ya. Hanya leave breakout. Pindah ya. Hanya leave breakout room saja. Oke. Saya mengirimkan broadcast yang pertama. Oke. Oke, ini ada nih. Oke, dari Miss Lauren, coba bisa terjemah. Share ke teman-teman. Zoom Anda. Apa sih tantangan terbesar di online teaching? Oke.
Join my group and have a look. I'm going to join room 2 and see what's happening in there, Miss. And then I'll come right up.
Waktu 2 menit ya. Oke, Miss Lauren.
Hi.
Oke, ada tombolnya, silakan diklik. Oke, ini saya masukkan. Oke, Pak Dian, Pak Dian Asih Montessori, masuk ke ruang 9. Oke, Jason, ternyata masuk ke ruang 9 juga. Okay, somebody, okay, ada yang nulis ini. Okay, I was in the Zoom, I was in the room, but everyone was leaving. Okay, again, please go back again. Oh, you know what? Ini hanya kayak supaya latihan aja, supaya kita, oh gini tuh caranya ya, supaya tahu ya. Okay, so I left too. It's okay, no problem, no problem. It happens ya. Terjadi di mana aja, kapanpun itu. Kayak iklan aja kita nih sekarang ya. Oke, nggak apa-apa. Yang sudah join, oke, sekali lagi ya, tantangan. Oke. Mr. Jason, should I end it in like a 1 minute?
Yeah, you could end it now and it'll give them 1 minute to...
Okay, all right. All right, I will end it now. Close all rooms. Okay, everybody will come back. Ya, ingin memperkenalkan diri, tapi ada yang sudah keluar. Nggak apa-apa, ya. Oke, selamat datang kembali Bapak Ibu. Oke, mungkin ada yang tadi ya, Miss, sudah join. Terus pada pergi, saya juga pergi. It's okay, nggak apa-apa ya. Hanya contoh, hanya example dari Pak Jason, how we use breakout room ya. Mungkin sebelum saya kembalikan ke Pak Jason, untuk settingannya tidak harus Zoom Pro. Bapak Ibu bisa langsung ke setting meeting basic, dan kemudian cari yang namanya meeting, cari namanya breakout room, di enable atau diperbolehkan ya, sehingga nanti bisa digunakan. Apalagi Bapak Ibu yang temannya banyak, mohon maaf, peserta didiknya banyak, lebih dari 15, 30 orang, maaf banget. Oke, Mr. Jason, I will give it back to you. What I need to find the, wait a minute, I need to find the, okay, there you are. Okay, there you go. Mr. Jason, back to you.
Okay, so thank you, Ms. Astri. In summary, one size does not fit all. So we cannot and we should not just stand in front of our class or present the exact same information to all of your students. You should be using assessment to guide your teaching. You need to be flexible as a teacher. It's another message similar to what Ms. Lauren was saying, that it takes work, but we have a responsibility to do this for our students. So we need to show flexibility as a teacher and differentiate our learning. We need to use our assessment to group our students. We need to vary the tasks across a lesson or a unit of work so that they're not just the same tasks. If all you're doing are written tasks, you are missing out 3/4 of your students that learn visually, that learn through listening, and that learn through doing. So think about the different tasks that you do in a unit of work. Are you trying to cover a different range, or are you just doing the same thing? So every time it's a written assignment, are you trying to do different ways? So for example, I've been looking at documentaries, which is a lot of work, but the students have been creating their own documentaries, which is a completely different type and style of learning to an essay, for example. So think about how you can vary your lessons in order to make it more interesting for your students and challenge them in different ways. And I know that some don't have the luxury that we have with students having their own devices, but if you can, and there are different ways that you can do it. You can record your Zoom lesson and you can share that with the students. If they don't all have Zoom, you can share it as a video file and they can watch it later on. They don't have to be live in front of you. But Zoom is a fantastic platform to use. It's free. You can pay for it for more advanced features. Personally, I don't. I just use the free version and I find that's plenty for what I need. And it allows teachers to successfully execute differentiated instructions into your teaching, and it is a great way to navigate through this jungle of online learning. So that's all I have to say. Please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Thank you very much, and I'll see you later.
Thank you for your very wonderful presentation, Mr. Jason. Bapak Ibu sekarang ini adalah akhir sesi kedua, tapi sebelum kami ke sesi berikutnya, izinkan saya merangkum kembali materi yang tadi sudah diberikan oleh Bapak Jason Rainer. Jadi Bapak Ibu guru tadi, Bapak Jason Rainer ini menjelaskan tentang pembelajaran yang terdiferensiasi. Beliau sejalan dengan materi yang dibawakan oleh Ibu Loren, Bapak Jason mengemukakan pentingnya pembelajaran yang terdiferensiasi atau lebih dikenal dengan differentiated learning kalau dalam bahasa Inggris. Apa itu pembelajaran yang terdiferensiasi? Pembelajaran yang terdiferensiasi ini Bapak Ibu yaitu adalah adanya penyesuaian pembelajaran untuk memenuhi kebutuhan siswa. Karena kenapa Bapak Ibu? Karena masing-masing siswa ini memiliki kebutuhan yang berbeda-beda. Bagaimana penyesuaian seperti apa yang bisa diberikan? Bisa dalam bentuk konten, bisa dalam bentuk proses, bisa dalam bentuk produk, atau bentuk lingkungan belajar, atau bentuk pembelajaran. Tadi sebagai contohnya Bapak, sebagai ilustrasinya Bapak Jason menjelaskan bahwa contohnya ketika diberikan teks narasi, siswa dengan kemampuan tinggi mungkin bisa di-challenge, bisa ditantang dengan diberikan pertanyaan-pertanyaan yang lebih mendalam, yang lebih implisit tentang maksud dari penulis dan lain sebagainya. Kemudian bagaimana dengan kelompok yang memiliki kemampuan di bawah ini mungkin diberikan pertanyaan yang sedikit lebih berbeda, lebih mudah, tidak terlalu dalam. Kemudian beliau menjelaskan ada 4 kunci-kunci kesuksesan yang bisa dicapai untuk mencapai pembelajaran yang terdiferensiasi ini. Yaitu yang pertama, menggunakan penilaian dalam rangka mengarahkan, memandu proses pembelajaran. Kemudian beliau juga menekankan pentingnya, yaitu kunci kedua, yaitu pengelompokan siswa berdasarkan kebutuhan atau pertimbangan-pertimbangan tertentu. Kemudian juga menjelaskan bahwa harus ada pembedaan tugas belajar. Kemudian juga harus ada pemberian tugas yang bervariasi. Untuk kunci sukses yang pertama, yaitu assessment, beliau menjelaskan bahwa ada 2 tipe assessment atau penilaian, yaitu formatif dan summative, di mana formatif ini diberikan sepanjang unit, di sepanjang bab ini dibahas, sedangkan summative ini penilaian yang diberikan pada akhir. Nah, yang mana yang lebih cocok untuk digunakan untuk pembelajaran yang terdiferensiasi, yang mana yang harus lebih banyak digunakan sebagai panduan, yaitu yang formatif. Formatif ini tidak harus tes Bapak Ibu, bisa dalam bentuk percakapan, bisa dalam bentuk Bapak Ibu guru melihat tugas-tugas yang sudah dikerjakan anak-anak. Jadi Bapak Ibu guru bisa melihat, oh anak ini punya kemampuan yang lebih. Oh anak ini sudah bisa melihat pattern. Oh ini sudah mampu melakukan perkalian 2 digit dikalikan dengan 1 digit mungkin. Kemudian dari percakapan-percakapan tersebutlah nanti Bapak Ibu guru bisa menggunakan ini untuk sebagai dasar pengelompokan. Jadi dari penilaian yang formatif ini kemudian akan digunakan untuk mengelompokkan siswa-siswa tersebut. Kenapa perlu dikelompokkan Bapak Ibu guru? Karena menurut Bapak Jason tadi menekankan bahwa ada sebuah penelitian, sudah ada banyak penelitian yang menunjukkan bahwa ketika siswa ini dikelompokkan kepada kelompok-kelompok yang sesuai dengan level kemampuannya, ternyata mereka lebih percaya diri. Mereka tidak takut melakukan kesalahan. Jadi membuat kesalahan ini sangat penting ditekankan ke siswa bahwa it is okay to make mistake. Jadi tidak apa-apa membuat kesalahan. Kenapa kenapa nggak apa-apa? Karena nanti ketika melakukan kesalahan, guru mengetahui oh terjadi kesalahan, kemudian bisa dianalisis, kemudian bisa diperbaiki, dibantu dengan feedback, dibantu untuk menjadi lebih baik. Kemudian kalau pengelompokan ini sebenarnya Bapak Ibu guru tidak hanya berdasarkan level kemampuan, juga bisa divariasikan, juga salah satu diantaranya adalah berdasarkan gaya belajar siswa. Jadi bisa juga pertimbangannya tidak hanya level kemampuannya, tadi juga digarisbawahi bisa dengan mungkin dikelompokkan berdasarkan interest, bisa berdasarkan apa yang disukai, apa yang pola belajar. Nanti Pak Jason menjelaskan tentang gaya belajar, part. Tadi ada yang visual, ada auditory, ada kinestetik. Kemudian beliau juga menggarisbawahi tips, beliau memberikan tips itu di aturan per 20 menit. Jadi beliau menyarankan bahwa setiap pembelajaran, ketika Anda melakukan kegiatan pembelajaran, satu kegiatan belajar itu harus maksimal 20 menit. Kenapa maksimal 20 menit? Karena nanti kalau sudah lewat 20 menit, nanti siswa-siswa sudah tidak processingnya sudah turun, nanti outputnya sudah tidak bagus. Jadi tadi Bapak Jason, loh tapi kan pelajaran 1 jam, ini kok aturannya 20 menit, maksudnya adalah ketika setelah selesai 20 menit, Bapak Ibu Guru memberikan variasi tugas yang berbeda. Jadi mungkin ada anak-anak dengan gaya belajar yang berbeda, ini bisa juga terakomodasi lewat aturan 20 menit ini. Kemudian juga tadi digarisbawahi bahwa perlunya ada pembedaan tugas belajar. Kenapa? Adanya pembedaan tugas belajar juga variasi tugas dan variasi unitnya. Kenapa? Karena kembali lagi ada siswa dengan gaya belajar yang berbeda-beda. Kemudian tadi di akhir sesi juga Bapak Jason juga sudah memberikan sedikit referensi demonstrasi tentang penggunaan Zoom ya Bapak Ibu Guru. Tadi Miss Asri kalau boleh saya lihat sebentar tadi untuk memberikan sedikit rangkuman untuk Bapak Ibu Guru ke slide yang ada Zoom-nya. Tadi Bapak Jason tadi, satu lagi Miss Asri, satu lagi ke atas. Ya tadi memberi contoh penggunaan bagaimana menggunakan media Zoom untuk memfasilitasi pembelajaran terdiferensiasi. Pastinya tadi juga disampaikan bahwa mungkin tidak semua Bapak Ibu Guru dan siswa memiliki fasilitas Zoom untuk pembelajaran. Tapi kalau kebetulan Bapak Ibu Guru menggunakan Zoom, jadi tadi diberikan contoh penggunaan Breakout Rooms. Miss Asri boleh ke slide berikutnya, di mana ini bisa digunakan untuk memfasilitasi pengelompokan kecil itu Bapak Ibu Guru. Jadi siswa itu dapat digunakan untuk diskusi, jadi mereka melatih siswa untuk bisa ikut serta dalam diskusi, menyampaikan argumentasi, mengekspresikan pendapatnya. Kemudian tadi slide berikutnya Bapak Jason juga menjelaskan tentang penggunaan share screen. Mungkin kalau sudah sering menggunakan Zoom, mungkin familiar dengan tools ini. Jadi bisa untuk whiteboard, bisa untuk web page, dan lain sebagainya. Kemudian tadi juga sudah dilakukan sedikit demonstrasi. Tadi Bapak Ibu Guru sudah mencoba di breakout rooms, masuk ke breakout rooms, itu gambarannya Bapak Ibu Guru, kalau Bapak Ibu Guru ternyata menggunakan fasilitasi, nanti siswa-siswa Bapak Ibu Guru akan merasakan hal yang sama. Tiba-tiba mungkin pertama kali, ini kemana ini kok saya sendirian. Apalagi kalau ini sinyalnya itu rada rendet putus-putus itu Bapak Ibu Guru, yang satu udah masuk, yang dua udah masuk, yang satunya masih nggak tahu di awang-awang belum masuk Bapak Ibu Guru. Demikian Bapak Ibu Guru, ini mungkin saya berbicaranya sedikit terlalu cepat. Nanti Bapak Ibu Guru tenang saja, ini nanti slide-nya akan kami bagikan. Nanti juga jika ada pertanyaan juga setelah sesi ini, sesi berikutnya adalah sesi tanya jawab. Jadi nanti Bapak Ibu Guru jika ada yang kurang jelas nanti bisa ditanyakan. Mengingatkan lagi, pemberian pertanyaan bisa lewat slido.com yang tadi sudah di-share oleh Miss Asri dengan format nama, kemudian instansinya dari instansi, kemudian asal kota. Demikian Bapak Ibu Guru, terima kasih. Saya kembalikan ke Miss Asri. Ibu Asri, monggo Ibu Asri.
Terima kasih. Ya, makasih Miss Yaya, luar biasa. Thank you Mr. Jason as well. Thank you Miss Lauren. Now, okay, some teachers here, participants asking me questions like, oh, where is it? Kenapa saya jadinya pakai bahasa Inggris ya? Aduh, maafkan saya. Bapak Ibu sekalian, ada yang menanyakan, link presensi di mana? Nanti Pak setelah sesi tanya jawab ya. Jadi jangan kemana-mana. Kalau misalkan nanti ada masalah pada gangguan sinyal, tetap akan kami bagikan. Oke. Oke, ini adalah dari primary. Mohon Bapak Ibu untuk menyimak sebentar.
Oh, hey there.
Hi, welcome to reception in grade 1.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to our grade 2 class.
My signal is good.
This is my classroom. Come on in.
Hi.
Signal is bad. Signal is bad.
Welcome to grade 4. Come on in.
Hi, so I'm Miss Has.
My name is Miss Rebecca.
Hi, I'm Miss Paula.
My name is Lauren and I'm from
Internet. Internet. Went well.
Australia.
My name is Mr. Jason.
I have been teaching for 12 years.
But I've been teaching for over 10 years now.
Been teaching here at Semarang now for 3 years.
I've been teaching for 12 years now.
I've been teaching for 14 years.
I prefer working hands-on. And
Develop the confidence to be writers and speakers.
grade 3 students are introduced to the scientific method
That allow their students to use their math knowledge in real life situations and consolidate their learning.
I believe that cooperative learning is a huge part of 21st century education.
Oke, sebelumnya boleh saya tanya lagi, apakah Bapak Ibu bisa mendengar suara saya? Saya tadi mengalami masalah. Oke, terima kasih. Terputus-putus, nggak bisa melihat Pak Jason sama Bu Loren. Oh my God, nggak apa-apa. Silahkan kunjungi YouTube kami atau Semarang Instagram kami di Semarang MS. Oke, kata kunci yang kedua Bapak Ibu. Oke, yang pertama tadi different needs. Oke, mungkin ada yang lupa apa sih Miss? Different needs. Yang kedua adalah online. Ya, sekali lagi dengan huruf kecil semua. Teaching online dengan spasi. Yang pertama tadi different needs, yang kedua teaching online. Link presensi akan dibagikan setelah sesi tanya jawab. Kita sudah menerima banyak sekali pertanyaan. Oke, sebelumnya untuk bagi yang masih ingin bertanya, kita memiliki waktu 15 menit. Mungkin saya potong menjadi 12 menit karena kita ada sesi foto. Silakan masukkan pertanyaan di slide.com, masukkan nama peserta, instansi, kota, dan pertanyaan. Boleh bahasa Indonesia, boleh bahasa Inggris ya. Presensi link nanti akan diberikan setelah sesi tanya jawab. Saya akan stop sharing screen. Oke, mungkin saya ngasih spotlight ke siapa nih? Speaker view. Oke. Alright, mungkin bisa langsung Miss Yaya juga kita membacakan pertanyaan.
Ya, Miss
Oke. Mungkin saya bisa memberitahu pertanyaan pertama. Oke. Ini dua pertanyaan pertama dari nyuwun sewu jika ada salah pengucapan nama dan title ya. Ibu Sri Hasuti dari Binus School Serpong, Tangerang Selatan. Hai Ibu, apa kabar? Semoga baik-baik saja di sana. Dan juga dari Pak Muhammad Gunarso, SMPN 4 Sendai, Ketapang, Kalimantan Barat. Luar biasa Bapak, terima kasih sudah join jauh-jauh ya. Berdua jauh banget dari Semarang. So, Mr. Jason and Miss Lauren, both participants are not from Semarang. They're actually quite far away. One from Borneo or Kalimantan, West Kalimantan, and the other one is actually from Tangerang. Okay, welcome. Okay, pertanyaannya mirip, jadi saya jadikan satu ya. How can teachers motivate students who won't turn on their video during online learning? And how can we motivate them to actively participate, to speak up? And basically the same thing with the other one, how to motivate students so they can actively participate in our online learning. Monggo, Miss Lauren or Mr. Jason would like to answer the question.
I will go first and then Mr. Jason might have something to add. You need rules and boundaries. The students need to know from the start that you expect them to have their video on. They need to understand that the rules of the classroom. However, a big group can be intimidating, particularly for teenagers. That's why the smaller groups are more important, easier. For me, I have an hour and a half for literacy. So I break it into 3 sessions and I meet a third of my class for each session. In the smaller session, they are more likely to turn on their video and be active in discussion. When we have whole class sessions, yes, there are some students that are more dominant than others. So I say, all right, everyone type your answer in the chat. Okay, put up your hands if something. I have to give them interactive activities to know that they're doing it. We also, I say your video has to be on. You can joke around, you say, when we learn in the classroom, we don't learn like this. That's not how we are in the classroom. So we can't, this is still the classroom. You must show your face. But I would recommend smaller groups, interactive activities. And as a teacher, you should note who's listening and who's not. So I can say, oh, Miss Yaya, Miss Linda, Miss Papa, Miss Pucci. I can call on the people and see what they're doing. And so they will know, oh, Miss is looking at me, Miss is talking to me. So you have to involve the students, do something interactive that everyone is doing, and smaller groups. Mr. Jason, anything else you'd like to add to that one? It's a tough one.
Pretty similar, really. For some classes, I have both grade 5 and 6 together, and there's a lot of them, and it's very hard to get everyone to interact that way. Whereas when I do my literacy and numeracy, similar to Ms. Lauren, I have different groupings. The other thing that I always do is not let the dominant people dominate. So I have, especially in grade 5, I have 2 students that just love to answer every question. And really it just comes, like Ms. Lauren said, it comes down to boundaries. They know that they're not allowed to call out. And if they do call out, I'll remind them, don't call out. I want to hear the answers from other students as well. So I let them know that I'm going to be asking these people. Sometimes I'll put them into groups, into a breakout room, and I'll say, right, from this breakout room, I want student 1 to report back. From breakout room 2, I want this student to report back. And I force them to talk. But then we've set up an environment where they will talk. You have to put the work in. You can't demoralize them first day. If they're really shy, and sometimes they are really shy, and you just have to praise them for well done. Thank you for speaking up. And the video thing as well, it's amazing what positive reinforcement does. It's so simple, but all I say is thank you to these students who have put their videos on straight away, and then all of a sudden other videos start going on. So, but it is hard, especially online, and there are challenges of course, bad internet connection as well. So you also, I think what it also comes back to is you also have to be flexible and realistic that some of these students, I have a student that has 2 other siblings working at the same time, and every time they put their sound on, you just hear all this chat in the background. So they're scared to put their microphone on because they're worried about all that noise. Miss Lauren's got a good point with the chat where they can type their answer to you and they show their understanding that way as well.
Okay, thank you Ms. Lauren, thank you Mr. Jason. Ini akan saya mungkin ulangi sedikit ya. Untuk dari Ms. Lauren, saya setuju karena sebagai guru juga aturan kita harus jelas di dalam kelas ya, rules, boundaries. Seperti apa yang ingin Anda lakukan di kelas. Memang ketika grupnya jauh lebih besar pasti jauh lebih mengintimidasi, tetapi apabila kita dapat menetapkan aturan ini di awal akan jauh lebih istilahnya mudah dalam tanda kutip mengatur kelas. Mungkin seperti Miss Lauren tadi dan Mr. Jason bisa breakdown. What is breakdown in Indonesian? Memilah-milah topik ya, memilah topik sehingga menjadi katakanlah nih ada satu KD misalnya itu ada beberapa dari beberapa topik misalnya itu dipilah-pilah sehingga tidak dalam suatu waktu. Tentunya Bapak Ibu sekalian sudah memahami betul mengenai istilah JP ya, dan mungkin itu bisa lebih perkecil lagi. Kemudian interactive activities. Jadi aktivitas interaktif itu sangat penting sekali, terutama daring. Ya, saya sebagai guru saya menggunakan Nearpod, for example, karena Nearpod itu ketika para peserta didik join, namanya kelihatan semua nih, kelihatan sekali yang jawab siapa, yang enggak siapa. Itu jadi kadang-kadang di kelas saya aturan saya memang tidak mengharuskan murid untuk mengaktifkan video, tetapi jika saya menggunakan aplikasi yang saya pilih, saya tahu bahwa itu murid para peserta didik bisa menggunakannya dengan bijak sesuai dengan aturan saya di kelas. Saya tahu mana yang bisa ikut, mana yang tidak. Kemudian tentunya sebagai teacher lihat lagi di aturan tadi, siapa sih yang nggak aktif, siapa yang nggak, itu juga tetap harus diperhatikan. Jadi jangan langsung lewat aja ya. Untuk dari Pak Jason, usahakan untuk murid-murid atau peserta didik yang suka mendominasi kelas untuk tidak mendominasi kelas ya. Alasannya supaya kita bisa memberikan kesempatan bagi mereka yang tidak istilahnya jarang sekali aktif. Kemudian penggunaan video atau yang sifatnya visual itu sangat menstimulasi para peserta didik di kelas. Dan tentunya sebagai guru, sebaik apapun kita di kelas, kita tetap akhirnya harus sifat realistis, fleksibel, melihat situasi, dan kita juga akhirnya kembali lagi ke yang tadi disebutkan oleh Miss Lauren, mendesain ulang kelas. Kita selalu refleksi dan kembali lagi di awal. Oke, Miss Yaya, mungkin bisa dibantu dengan pertanyaan berikutnya?
Ya,
Waktu kita tinggal dikit lagi ya.
Pertanyaan kedua dari Ibu Adinda dari SMPN 5 Depok. Ini juga dari luar kota ini, jauh-jauh dari Depok ya Ibu. Ya ampun, naik apa Ibu? Jauh sekali Ibu. Ini pertanyaannya cukup menantang ini untuk Bapak Jason dan Ibu Lauren. The question is quite challenging for both of you, Mr. Jason and Miss Lauren. The question is there any way of giving effective feedback if a teacher has more than 300 students?
Ya.
So, jadi pertanyaan tadi, adakah cara pemberian personal feedback yang efektif jika Bapak Ibu guru ini mengajarnya mengampunya nih 300 siswa atau mungkin lebih?
Okay. All right, thank you, Miss Yaya, and thank you for the question. I had time to think about this one because this question came in earlier, so I've had time to prepare my answer. First of all, if you're a subject teacher, you have more time because you don't have the homeroom duties. So there's something about that. If you have 300 students, I would recommend giving personalized feedback. You could do it once a week. 300 divided by 560. So you've got 60 kids per day. The other thing that I would highly recommend is a comment bank. So there are places you can go, or you can create your own. For your lower students, for your middle students, for your top students, what is the feedback? So maybe this is the comment for the student who is struggling, and maybe that applies to 5 students. Maybe this comment applies to 10 students. So while it's personalized, there is an element of copying and pasting what you're going to say. If you took 1 to 2 minutes per child, it would take you an hour or 2 per day. Based on my teaching and my grading, I would spend probably 2 hours a day on feedback, assessment, grading, marking. You have to manage your time well and do it during the class. So while you are teaching, give the feedback. While they are working on it, give the feedback. Point out the ones you can during the lesson, and then take 1 to 2 minutes per child. You could do once a week, and have your comment banks ready. So this is for a child that didn't meet the objective. This is for a child that needs to meet the objectives and extend it a little further. This is for the extension group where they've done it, they have surpassed what you've asked them to do, and then this is what your next steps would be for them. So you can have a variety of feedback ready to go. If we're online and it's typed, it's actually easier because you can copy paste it. You can copy paste it and you can send it via Google Classroom, email, something. So you'd need to almost group or rank, it's not great, but group or rank the kids and then give them the feedback based on where they were.
Terima kasih, saya.
Jadi Ibu Dinda, tadi ini Ibu Lauren menjelaskan bahwa memberikan tips mungkin bisa dilakukan dengan pemberian feedback per week atau mingguan. Ini mungkin akan tetap terlihat sangat banyak ini karena kalau 300 dibagi 5 itu kan masih 60 siswa ya Ibu, masih banyak, tapi mungkin jika Ibu takes 1 minute, 2 minutes, ini mungkin tetap bisa di-cover mungkin dalam jarak waktu 100 sampai 2 jam. Sarannya ini sebenarnya kan ada resources comment bank, jadi membuat daftar komen nanti mungkin untuk ini untuk siswa yang berkemampuan ini untuk siswa yang berkemampuan tinggi, yang mungkin di tengah, kemudian yang lebih di bawah. Kenapa perlu ada comment bank Bapak Ibu guru? Karena kalau untuk mungkin lebih untuk siswa kelas-kelas atau guru-guru yang mengampu dengan banyak siswa nanti bisa digunakan. Jadi mungkin satu komen ini bisa digunakan untuk 5 siswa. Jadi lebih efektif dan juga tidak menyita waktu. Jadi mungkin kalau kenapa bisa dibilang 1 siswa 1 menit ya, mungkin karena kalau memang sudah ada sistemnya, sudah digrupkan, mungkin akan sedikit lebih merepotkan, tapi jika di awal sudah digabungkan atau sudah dikelompokkan, oh ini siswa dengan kemampuan tinggi, ini tuh siswa dengan yang cepat menangkap materi, oh ini siswa dengan membutuhkan sedikit lebih banyak bantuan. Ini ketika sudah digrupkan, Bapak Ibu guru, kemungkinan besar bisa dilaksanakan, tapi mungkin memang harus once a week, dari every day. Jadi 1 siswa dapatnya 1 minggu sekali. Kemudian juga bisa diberikan feedback ini ketika juga sebisa mungkin disampaikan feedback, mungkin feedback ke seluruh kelas, jadi juga disampaikan di kelas begitu. Bapak Jason mau ditambahkan atau sudah cukup, Bapak Jason? Do you want to add anything, Mr. Jason, or that's enough?
I think Ms. Lauren covered it, and I take it off to you for having 300 students to do that for it. So.
Ya, luar biasa.
Ya Bapak, ya Ibu Adinda, kuat Ibu, stay strong Ibu. Ini daringnya. Strong Ibu.
Semangat Ibu Dinda. Oke, kita sudah, misalnya ini kita sudah jam 2.59. Mau 1 pertanyaan lagi atau mungkin kita simpan, kita masukkan ke dalam slide? Bisa ya?
I think someone had a question about differentiation. Was there something about differentiation in the questions? I think there was one that was really quite specific for what we were talking about maybe from...
Oh, yes, okay. Okay, Ibu Melissa, Miss Melissa from GMRS Bali. I think we can cover that one.
Yeah.
And then untuk Ibu Nurul, Miss X, karena namanya belum masuk ya. Kita Bu Vita dari Semesta Semarang sama Pak Muhammad Gunarso. Pertanyaan akan kita cover dalam slide, jadi jangan khawatir, semua pertanyaan akan kita masukkan ke dalam slide ya. Oke, dari Ibu Melissa, oke, pertanyaannya untuk mungkin spesifikasi, boleh untuk Miss Lauren atau Mr. Jason. If we do differentiation in a class, how about the standard of learning outcomes that we need to use? Do we then make different standards for different level? Oh, okay, thank you for the questions. Take away, please, speakers.
It is a tough question. That's why I wanted to talk about it. The reason we differentiate, the reason we scaffold, the reason we support is to close the gap. So when you have a new student come in and they're not at the same level, we use the differentiation, we use the scaffolding to bring them up to the level. So this should be something that isn't a forever problem. You should use it to bring them up to the learning standard, and then you can extend them this way. You don't have to extend them up and down. There's extension that goes this way. Differentiation also, you should be able to achieve the learning goals in a different way. So you use a different style, you use a different technique, you use different support in order to help those students reach the same goals. Now, you will have students that don't reach the goals. That comes back to your school's policy on what you do with the students who don't meet that requirement. Maybe they do need to repeat the class. Maybe they do need remedial tasks. Maybe they do need tutoring. What is your process there? But if you give the right support and the right differentiation, they should be likely to reach the learning goal. So different students require different support in order for them to reach the same place. They can't have the same support and reach the same place. If you differentiate it well, if you build on prior knowledge, you should be able to bring them close enough to the standard. Mr. Jason, what do you think?
Yeah, pretty much like you're saying. It also depends on the level that you're talking about as well. If you've got remedial students in your class, you've got no choice but to go lower. I think as well, the thing that teachers need to do is have some understanding of the levels before and after your class. Last year, 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago, and we're confused now with this online stuff. When we were back in the class, I had a group in maths that were a level behind the other students. So their work was heavily scaffolded. It was in particular maths. So I had to do a lot of, they were a mixture of grade 5 and 6 actually. We split our classes up in they were mixed in grade 5 and 6. So we did a lot of scaffolding with number at the level below where they should have been. And also, as Ms. Lauren was saying, that it's not about always going up, it's about going wider. We don't have time in 1 year to go over in enough depth of all the learning outcomes. We have especially in Cambridge and back home in New Zealand curriculum, there's a huge amount of LOs to cover in a year. So these advanced students, you're going deeper into those and you're looking at connections between them. So it's not necessarily going into the next grade, it's about exploring them deeper and actually going into a more thorough view and teaching and learning of those learning outcomes.
Oke, terima kasih Miss Lauren sama Mr. Jason. Jadi diferensiasi tadi ini tidak untuk membuat jarak antara satu peserta dengan peserta lain lebih jauh. Peserta lain lebih jauh ya. Justru sebenarnya dengan teknik-teknik diferensiasi mendekatkan atau memperkecil jarak ini dengan scaffolding atau mungkin entah dengan memberikan tutorial atau tutoring atau mungkin remedial dan kembali lagi ke policy atau kebijakan dari sekolah tersebut. Sehingga pada akhirnya tujuan dari diferensiasi ini adalah semua peserta didik terutama yang perlu yang mungkin istilahnya memerlukan pendekatan yang lebih dalam lagi itu dapat mencapai goal yang sama. Jadi goal tidak berubah, goalnya tetap sama. Nah, kemudian juga dari dari Miss Lauren juga menambahkan bahwa dukungan yang tepat itu sebenarnya dengan cara different method dengan cara diferensiasi yang berbeda, tetapi bisa mencapai goal yang sama. Dari Mr. Jason juga yang sangat menarik adalah melihat level mereka sebelum dan sesudah mungkin kelas itu dimulai atau mungkin satu term atau term 2 kita melihat bahwa di mana sih anak ini berada dan setelah kita melakukan diferensiasi apakah ada perubahan di setelah periode tersebut. Jadi akan mungkin memiliki waktu yang sangat cukup untuk mengcover semua kompetensi, semua learning outcome ya. Pasti akan ada saatnya kita sebagai guru harus mengeksplorasi lebih dalam cara-cara dalam diferensiasi ini supaya setiap murid itu dapat mencapai goal yang sama. Semoga saya bisa memberikan terjemahan yang baik. Oke, ini dari dulu untuk sesi pertanyaannya karena sudah 6 minutes past 3. Jam 3 lebih 6, oke, maaf saya lupa. Jam 3 lebih 6, kita akan lanjut ke sesi berikutnya, tetapi seperti janji saya, there you go, ya, link presensi juga bisa dilihat di chat. Nah, oke, kita akan melakukan sesi foto, jadi silakan Bapak Ibu, oke, saya akan galeri view nih, oke. Mohon dibuka Bapak Ibu videonya agar kita bisa melakukan sesi foto bersama. Jadi jangan, aduh isi per sesi, bye. Stay tune ya sampai tinggal beberapa menit lagi ya. Silakan mengaktifkan foto. Kameramennya Bu Loren sendiri loh. Ya, jadi jangan biarkan Bu Loren menunggu. Oke. Karena kita memiliki jumlah partisipan yang cukup banyak, kita tidak tahu Bapak Ibu ada di halaman yang mana. Jadi silakan berpose selama 30 detik ke depan ya. 30 detik ke depan. Oke, mungkin kita bisa mulai Miss Lauren, take away. Oke. Yeah, Ms. Laura? Okay,
You need to tell everyone to hold their pose, Miss.
Okay, all right.
4 pages, okay?
4 pages, okay. Hold your pose, smile. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Okay, keep holding it, keep holding it.
Okay, ditahan. 1, 2, 3. Oh, I like that sound.
One more, Miss. Right.
1, 2.
Done.
Oke, terima kasih. Oke, Bapak Ibu sekalian, terima kasih telah. Oke, saya masih ada satu slide lagi yang ingin saya share. Oke, there you go. Terima kasih. Mungkin Bapak sudah tidak ada di sini kepada Kadiknas kita, Bapak Gunawan yang sudah tidak, yang tadi sudah. Oh, ada 2 yang ada masih di ruang tunggu. Oke. kepada pihak Dinas Pendidikan Kota Semarang yang telah bersedia membuka acara dan menandatangani sertifikat kepesertaan webinar. Kemudian juga pembicara kita yang telah memberikan materi yang luar biasa pada hari ini. Thank you, Miss Lauren. Thank you, Mr. Jason, to actually spare your time with us today to share your magnificent knowledge with us. Dan juga kepada para peserta webinar yang telah hadir pada hari ini. Terima kasih juga telah menyempatkan waktu di hari Sabtu siang, ya, setelah jam makan siang, webinar. Terima kasih kembali lagi, dan kepada seluruh panitia webinar yang tidak lain adalah guru dan staf dari Semarang Multinational School. Thank you so much for participating. See you again di acara selanjutnya. Terima kasih. Thank you, everybody. Oh, okay. My Zoom decided to not play. Oke, terima kasih Bapak Ibu. Kalau link nanti akan dibagikan juga presensi di grup WhatsApp, dan juga sudah saya taruh juga di sini di kolom chat jika Bapak Ibu ingin langsung mengklik linknya. Oke, terima kasih. Sampai jumpa di webinar selanjutnya. Panitia, silakan stay dulu ya untuk evaluasi. Terima kasih Bapak Ibu. Thank you. Tadi sebenarnya boleh aku ikut. Mana ya? Oh, already gone. Thank you. Mr. Jason, already leave?
Yeah.
Okay.